fascinating world of honeybees. I'm going to do a presentation, probably about 15-20 minutes, and then I want to let you have a couple questions. But if I have enough time remaining, I want to show you how this is church and how a beehive represents the churches and the bodies and the believers that are in the world today. I'm John Navier. I'm from Gratz. I live north of Gratz, right at the Bellevue and Luxembourg Road. I have Bellevue bees. I got my first beehive was a gift from my friend, and I still call him a friend, really. But his son-in-law brought 2 beehives up from Virginia. Didn't even ask him if he wanted them, but he just brought them up. And my buddy Dennis calls me and he says, I got 2 hives, I only want 1, you can have the other one, come and get it. So I went and got it. So I got my first beehive in spring of 2000. About 2 months later, my friend called me on the phone and he says, come and get this hive. He used a few descriptive words, but come and get this hive or I'm going to burn it, because he got stung too many times. So I ended up with both hives, and that's how I got started. And a year or so later, I bought 15 hives from a guy who was going out of business, and just sort of expanded. I read a lot of books and got involved with the capillary beekeepers in Harrisburg, and worked for many years at the farm show, which gave an opportunity not to dip ice cream, but to pick the brains of these beekeepers so that I could get that information that I needed. And I really enjoy it. I love it. When I was living at home, my uncle had bees on the farm. He wanted me to get involved in it to see how it was done. And like most people, I didn't want nothing to do with honeybees or any other bees for that matter. But I wish I would have done that. It's one of the regrets of my past life. Not past life, but you know what I mean. Earlier life. You know, going in that carnation stuff. So, the honeybees. There is, and I don't know the technical name, I think it's chaste. There is 3 types of bees in this box right now, but they are all honeybees, okay? First is a queen. The queen is the one that lays the eggs. And there's a whole process for doing that. She is fed royal jelly, which I'm sure that, by the way, is there any other beekeepers in here? Okay, now I have to be careful what I say. A queen, when a swarm or a hive decides to make a queen, they take an egg, a fresh egg, and they will feed it royal jelly. Now what that royal jelly does is a very high protein, and it encourages the maturing of the whole fertilizing wait a minute, words come here. The egg laying process, okay? All of the every honeybee, the first 3 days, will receive some royal jelly. Only the ones that are queens, are going to be a queen, will continue to get the royal jelly, and the rest of the bees and larvae, and you'll be able to see some down in this section. I'll invite you all to come up, except we can't mess up the camera. You'll be able to see little tiny eggs. You'll be able to see the different larvae as they're laying inside the shells. Okay, those ones that are chosen to be the worker bees will then be given bee bread, which is a mixture of pollen and honey. Okay, it's not as nearly as potent as the royal jelly. They will continue to feed that larvae until about 14 days. At the end of 14 days, then they will put a cap over it, and that's what this stuff is around here. This little circle. You'll be able to, when you come up and look at it, you'll be able to see the little capping on there. Those are worker bees. Then the queen, the queen will become like almost the size of a peanut. It's very large. The queen is the largest bee in the beehive. The queen is the one that lays the eggs. A drone bee is a male part of it, and he is the second largest. He does not have a stinger. I mean, you can play with a drone bee all day long. He can't hurt you in any way. And his responsibilities are simply to mate with a virgin queen. So when this queen hatches out, she will go around, first of all, inside the beehive and be sure that there are no other queen cells. If there are any other queen cells, she chews a hole in the side of that cell and she stings the larvae and kills the larvae. It's the only time that a queen will sting. A queen has a smooth barb for a stinger so she can withdraw it. A honeybee, the worker bees, field bees, nurse bees, whatever you want to call them, they're all female, by the way. Okay? They just haven't been fed that royal jelly so that their reproductive organs don't develop. The queen, when she sure there is no other queens around, will go out, mate, take off, the orient to the hive, will fly out and fly through a drone pool. This is where all the mature drones will gather in the sky. They will fly around. A queen will fly through that drone pool and mate. I gotta be careful, mixed audience here. It doesn't work out so good for the male because he dies. I'll tell you that much. But the queen will do that 15 to 20 times. And in those 15 to 20 matings that she does with the drones, gives her enough sperm so that when she comes back into the hive, she can lay eggs for the rest of her life, basically. Okay? There is a queen in here, but she's a good hider. She's marked with red. Beekeepers have come up with the numbered system of 5 colors, okay? Red, green, blue, yellow, and white. This year being 23, the color is red. Next year, 24, the color will be green. So if you have a hive that overwinters, or you have a hive that lives several years, and you see that red color on there, then you know that this is an old queen from 23. Penn State recommends that a beekeeper replace a new queen every year. And the reason that they do that is because a queen, as she gets older, loses her pheromone. And when the pheromone gets too low within the hive, then the bees tend to swarm. And that's not a bad thing. It's like I told the kids on Friday night, every youngster is the reproduction of a new generation. It's how we keep human beings going on this earth. Swarms are how honeybees keep that generation going. Okay, because when they swarm out, half of the bees will leave and half will stay in here. These guys will have a new queen, and the ones that fly out in the swarm, they find a building, an empty vacant building, they find a tree, they will set up a beehive. And they will, then how you have 2 hives instead of 1. Okay? This is not, I admit, this is not a really great frame at the bottom here, okay, because along the top here you can see this is capped honey. And you'll be able to see, if you come up and look at it, you'll be able to see that there's a difference in the coloring of the capping, so you can tell which is which. But this is dried honey that has been dried down to less than 17%, or 17% or less. What that means is that there is no water left in that honey. So that honey will have a shelf life of forever. It has been recorded that they have found honey in the tombs of the pharaohs of Egypt, which is several thousands of years old. And it still has a great taste, and it's a good honey. Now, if you put water into it, then it will ferment, it will spoil. Honey is like a sponge, and if it's not capped and sealed over, it has a tendency that it can draw in some other things that it shouldn't be in there, which maybe we'll get into. This on the top is all, you can look in, you can see a shiny, glistening color. This is all we call nectar. All right, this has not been dried down far enough yet that they put a capping on it. There are a couple spots, it's on the back side here, there's a couple spots maybe that big where it has to have a cap on it, so that they have dried that down. This is nectar. This is what bees go out to collect off of the trees, the flowers, vegetables. You gotta remember that honeybees are so critical to our food chain. It is the only insect that God created that gives a food product for human beings. The only insect. A yellow jacket, wasp, they're all bees, but they are solitary bees. Honeybees they need to be in a group. You take a bunch of honeybees and you set them somewhere by themselves, they will sit there and they will die. They have to have community. They have to have that fellowship. Everything that a honeybee does they do for the good of the beehive. Not for themselves, but for the good of the beehive, so that the beehive can continue to survive. In the natural world, there are two predators to honeybees. You want to know what's one of them? Do you know? What do you think would be a predator that would cause problem for a honeybee? Anyone?
Bears.
A bear, a black bear, or any kind of bear, actually. They are the #1 predators for a beehive. They will totally destroy a beehive. Okay, they will rip the frames apart, they will rip boxes apart, scatter them around. And honeybees have learned over the many years of defending themselves, I guess, that the only place that a bear can be hurt is the face area. Okay, because everywhere else on their body is heavy hair. So it's no use wasting their sting. A honeybee can only sting you one time, and then they die. Okay, a honeybee has a barbed stinger with a little venom sac on it, and that barbed stinger works like this. It keeps working its way deeper into your skin, and as it's doing that, that venom sac is muscular and it is pumping venom into your skin. Okay, so they've learned that the only place they can do any harm to a bear is around the face area. Many years ago, when I was younger and much more macho, I was watching these guys on video and I said, oh, this is cool. I can do this. You know, you go out there and you start working these honeybees and no veil. Believe me, that did not last long. I made my wife laugh so many times because I got stung on the lip or the nose, like a Jimmy Durante nose when it swelled up, you know, or the fat lips of, you know, Botox. And so I made her laugh pretty often. And so I learned my lesson early on that because you watch, we have DirecTV and have an Earth channel on there. And right now they're running different honeybee shows. Killer Bee Guy, Charlie Bee Company, I don't remember what the other one was. And I sat there and I watched these guys, well, except the one. I only watched him one time. I was like, you're an idiot. So I never went back to him. But I often wondered how much of the video that they take is cut out on the floor, because there's no way they can do that kind of stuff without getting stung. And actually, they're not going to show you that on television. They're going to cut that section out. The honeybees will travel up to 2.5 miles from the beehive, okay? But they are opportunists. They will only go as far as they have to go to get the food that they want. They will, right now, this time of the year, the little white Dutch clovers in your yard, that is a prime, you know, summertime food for honeybees, okay? Earlier in the spring, one of our signals is that when you see dandelions blooming, then is when you put your supers on, because dandelion are a good honey producing plant. Now, nobody likes to see them in their yard, except if you're a beekeeper, because then you love to see them, and the more you see, the better it is. I have a time talking to my wife out of nothing over in the grass, you know, when they're coming to bloom. I wasn't, just leave them in there. But they will travel 2.5 miles to get what they have to get. They will collect, in the spring of the year, honey flow for this area generally begins April and May. It's a primary month. June, you also get a good harvest. This year, I had one hive that totally filled one super in 5 days. Now, this was when the black locusts were blooming and the blackberries in the mountain were blooming, full bloom. And since I live at the base of the mountain, when I drove up the dog for a walk, I could walk by and it sounded like a swarm on those blackberry bushes. They just love that. That's good honey. Let's see, what else? Well, I'm going to jump over. There's so much I could say here, but I want to get into this other part because it's so critical to what I believe, and probably the reason why I love working with honeybees. Honeybee becomes, I asked the Lord about this on one day as I was working, and he said, why, you know, my fascination with honeybees. And he says, because it's my church. And I said, okay, explain that. He said, well, he said, the queen is the life of the beehive, right? The queen is the one that lays the eggs. It is the one that continues to flourish and keep the hive moving, just like the Holy Spirit does, His Spirit. Okay, Scripture tells you that you can do all you want, but the Holy Spirit gives the increase. Okay? It's only the Holy Spirit that can do that. The drone. The drone is those that have fallen through the slots. Okay? Please don't be offended because I'm a country boy and I talk this way. Drone is the lily sniffers and the Easter lilies and the poinsettias. Okay, they might come twice a year. And then you get, Dr. Stu will find this out, then you got phone calls from people, why do you come visit these people? They disappeared from our family. They've left the church and they don't want us until they need something. Guess where we are? We are the other 94% of the worker bees in here who are doing everything, working for the good of the hive. They're working for the good of the church. They are the ones who take care, provide meals, clean the church. They're the ones that do the work. See, everything in here, in the natural beehive realm, a queen will last 5 years. A drone will last 6 months, if that. The worker bee lasts 6 weeks. 3 weeks of that is in this cell. So, the last 3 weeks of its life, it is cleaning cells, it is feeding larvae, it is taking care of the queen, it's getting rid of the waste, it's the undertaker bees who, if a bee comes in and dies inside, they drag it outside, okay? They are the guard bees that don't allow another foreign bee, another different bee to come in there and rob out their supplies. We are the worker bees. We are the ones who keep the church functioning because we are doing, now we're not doing it for us, at least I hope you're not doing it for yourself. I hope you're doing it for the good of the Lord. But it's just a point that made me realize why I enjoy doing this. Now believe me, I still get stoned. And like Paul said, we have that struggle of two natures. That second nature is pretty ugly at times because they hurt. Those stings hurt. I'm telling you, okay? One of the things, and this is just on the personal property or personal things that we use. One of the main things is, I'm going to go with this. This is a hive tool. You cannot use or open a beehive without this, or a good strong piece. I have 2 pocket knives at home that are missing blades because I tried to open beehives without this tool. That blade steel will not hold up. It snaps it right off. Honeybees are meticulous in the fact that they seal everything down. When I put these frames in here on Friday morning, they were loose. They flop back and forth. You can shake this thing upside down, do anything you want with it. These hives will not move. Those frames will not move because they paste everything fast. They want it solid. They don't want anything to give. So that's why we have these. It's not because to prevent bee stings, but it's to keep that propolis and that black or that gooey stuff that they produce off of my clothing. This was washed. But all of those spots and stains that you see on there, that is propolis, and that ruins clothes. You cannot get it off. It will not come off. One of the other things that we use is a smoker. Now this is almost like I wouldn't say magic, but a smoker used properly keeps the bees nice and calm. Okay? When you put a thing of smoke along the bottom of it, or in the very top, my beehives, I have a notch cut in my inner cover, and put the outer cover on top of that, and I can smoke that in there. And that calms the bees down so that you can go in and you can work the bees and, and keeps them calm. Now, you can use too much smoke, and that has the opposite effect. It will cause them to get very agitated. I tell people, I am a lazy beekeeper, okay? I've learned through reading books and so on that I can tell what's going on inside this beehive simply by standing on the outside and watching bees going in and out, okay? When a honeybee, one of these honeybees, these worker bees, comes in there with a load of pollen in their basket, okay, this is a worker bee. By the way, I don't think I did tell you that the worker bees are all female, but we're not given enough royal jelly for their reproductive organs to develop. Occasionally, you will have one of these worker bees who decides that they're going to lay eggs too, and so they lay eggs, but they're all unfertilized eggs or drone eggs. And a drone does nothing for the hive, okay? So that hive is basically doomed. Now there's actions that we can take as a beekeeper if you got a laying worker, but it's definitely something we want to avoid. When the bees come in with this pollen on there, she's completely covered. It's on a sunflower. She's completely covered all over. A honeybee is all full of hair. Her whole body is covered with hair. And that's what makes it the best pollinator for any kind of fruits or vegetables. Because as she's not necessarily going after the pollen, she's going after that nectar. She's going after that sweet nectar that the plants give off. You'll have, ladies, in many of your flower beds and so on, you will have plants that you will never see a honeybee on. They're beautiful plants, beautiful flowers, but they are not drawn into them because they are not producing nectar. And if you don't have any nectar, the bee is not going to bother with them. So when you see a bee coming in with that pollen, you know you have a good laying queen because they use that pollen to feed the babies. Okay? There's a couple different things that you could look for in there, but the main thing is you got to remember that these girls, this time of the year, live for 6 weeks. 3 weeks in the cell, 2 weeks doing household duties, and basically the last week of their life, they're out collecting nectar and pollen. And the reason that they only last that extra week is because their wings wear out. They have 2 sets of wings, but they are very, very thin and very fragile. And after carrying repeated loads of honey, nectar, and pollen back into the beehive, the wings simply wear out. So a queen in the summertime lays up to 2,000 eggs a day. If you got a good strong hive, I can get, wife, you want to show this? This one's about my mom first. This was, you're better at that than I am. But I took a picture of this. This is my mother last year with a beehive down at her place, and I had 5 supers of honey on. Now, a super is basically 9 frames, and each frame weighs 5.5 pounds. So when you pull a super of honey off, you're lifting about 60 pounds each time you do that. Now these guys, some of the beekeepers that have strong backs and weak minds will use all the same size frames, and they will use all 9-inch stuff like this. Now you're talking 100 pounds. You're lifting them around, so I guess they go visit the chiropractor. Does anybody have any questions? I'm at my half hour, so any questions now, please? Oh, I forgot another point. Okay, natural predator of the beehive is a bear. What's the second predator? Oh, ants can become, all you need is nutmeg. Now the supply catalog will try to sell you all kinds of expensive stuff. Go to the grocery store, get nutmeg, put nutmeg on the top cover, and that'll take care of the ants. Second predator is also black and has a white stripe. There you go. Now you wouldn't think, that's what, not Peter and Paul, that's a poor illustration. But a skunk has the ability, it don't destroy any woodenware or any equipment, but it eats the bees. So it comes in at nighttime and it will sit in front of the beehive and it will scratch with its nails, scratch on the wood landing. When the guard bees come out to see what's going on, it licks them up. Okay? After repeated nights of doing this, it weakens the hive to the point that they can't survive anymore. So they're just as deadly. So anytime I've set up my own yards, bee yards, or help any of my friends to set them up, we always run that first strand of electric wire 6 inches off the ground, because you got to keep the skunks out of the bees. You wouldn't think they would, but they do. They can destroy a hive. And if you don't have that wire up, or that kind of protection, it only takes a day or two for you to realize that there's a problem, because when, like I said, a lazy beekeeper, I lift off, a beehive is made in such a way that it will have 2 boxes with this size frames on, this lower ones here. Okay, these are a 9-inch box or a frame. And then you put an inner cover on, and then your outer cover telescopes and fits down over and makes everything waterproof. That inner cover is the thing that when you have to have that hive tool to pry that lid off, because it'll break your blades, and you're not gonna, you can, do anything you want to, you're not gonna get that apart. It's amazing. If the federal government, I'm surprised they haven't put a ban on it, because the glue is that good. I mean, it'll hold anything together. But when you take that inner cover, that top cover off, the telescoping cover, you can pry that inner cover, take that off, and you can simply look in there, and you can tell the disposition of the bees. And if they are angry and they're sitting there with their heads pointing up, looking at you, put it back together and get out of there. Because they're angry, and they will come and get you. Just little tricks that you learn. Okay, when you're younger, you just figure, I'll just blaze through it. But you know what? It's not fun working a beehive that is angry. And we are blessed up in this area that this is not a real problem for us yet. It can be in the future. You hear all the stories of the killer bees, the Africanized bees, okay? All these bees that we beekeepers up here have are European bees. All these bees were imported basically from Europe. There are many, many different kinds of breeds of bees. Each one has good and bad characteristics to it. The killer bee was designated killer bee by the media, news media. But the killer bee is a product of his own environment, okay? Is basically, they don't have where they're in their home territories. They don't have beehives or places like that they live in. They live on cliffs and the side of mountains. They live in trees. So because they are open in the open air all the time and open to predators, they become very aggressive. And that has become a characteristic of those bees. The bee venom of a killer bee, I'm going to use that even though I don't, well, the venom of that killer bee is not any stronger than what this is, okay? But their aggressiveness in defending the hive is what causes the problems, all right? So when a honeybee stings you, they leave that sac and that barb on your hand, your skin, your arm, wherever it is. That releases also not just the venom into your skin, but it releases a pheromone that smells like a banana. Believe me, if you want trouble, eat a banana and go in a beehive. Wow, there's going to be some problem. They will chase you for a long way. But when they do that, they mark you. So the honeybees that are flying around there looking for who's causing the problem, they get a whiff of that and they come zeroing in on you. Okay? And that's what makes them so deadly. It's not the venom, it's the fact that it's the volume of venom from all the different bees. Each one of them bees only stings one time, just like a honeybee. But it leaves that mark and they just keep going right to it. Maybe you have any questions on this, because I don't want to hold you up anymore.
When do you eat your bananas?
Okay. I don't know how to respond to that. What was the question again?
When do you eat your bananas?
For breakfast. Yep, for breakfast. That's the only time. But honeybees are really calm. And it depends again on what time of the year you're doing this. Whenever you want to work a beehive, what time of the day, what time of the year, or the spring, summer, whatever. In early spring, they tend to be just a little more aggressive, but not too bad. But also in the spring, they get more irritated because the beekeeper wants to see what's going on. They want to be sure there's a good queen in there. They want to be sure that that queen is laying eggs and building up for the major honey flow. And so the beekeeper will open that beehive much more often, maybe once, maybe twice a week, just to be sure everything's going okay. That irritates the bees. During the summertime, not so much. They're very calm. Because in the summertime, as soon as the sun hits the hive, the field bees are out. Okay, now, when your field bees are out, you've lost at least a third of the bees that were in that hive. Okay, they're out foraging around, no problem. So you don't have near as many bees in the box to contend with. Because the nectar flow is coming in, all of these house bees, nurse bees, are tending the honey. When they bring that nectar in, it's like 22% moisture. Okay? Now you remember when I said it has to be 17 or less for it to keep. And so the bees that are coming back with that load of nectar will mix certain enzyme into them. When they get into the beehive, the bees don't, the bee that brought that honey and nectar in is not going to put that honey into the cell by itself. It passes it off to a house bee. House bee will add more enzyme and continue to dry it up. And eventually they will put it into a clean cell. And they will pack it in there. And then the bees, if you watch it, I loved it. I used to have this set up in my son's bedroom. Of course, he wasn't living there at the time. But I used to have this set up in there, and it's incredible to watch how these organized honeybees are. So then they pack nectar in there, and they keep working it and actually fanning. And they get the moisture and lower their moisture content down to the point that when it is dry, when it is 17% or less, the honey will be filled all the way out to the very end of that cell, and it won't fall out. It's that stiff that it stays right there. And then they put a cap across it and seal it. So it's incredible. In the fall of the year, and we're getting into it now, it's hot, it's dry, things have dried up, okay? We're getting into that, not dog days, but you know what, the real hot stuff in the summertime. Bees are getting cranky because these field bees that were out looking for something can't find anything. They're coming back empty. And they are women. Female, I should say. So they do have an attitude. So a beekeeper will try not to mess too much with a beehive. July, August, they'll just leave it alone, look at it from the outside, and just let it alone. Now when you get into October and generally September and October is the time that we normally treat our beehives. The problem we're having, oh, you guys are going to bless me. The problem that we have with honeybees right now, and why I wish everybody in here would get honeybees, is because we need more of them, more beekeepers, is the fact that we are trying to kill an insect that is living on an insect. Do you get that? These honeybees are insects. They're in that category, that chase. They're in that whole big category of insects. The main problem that a honeybee or a beekeeper has today is the fact that their mite, it's a very small, it's a fluid-sucking insect that attaches itself. I'm going to use a queen here simply to show you this point, but a queen normally is not accepted or a problem. This mite will attach itself right here in this center, right between the wings. It is the only spot that a honeybee cannot groom itself. That's what we're dealing with in nature, okay? This mite attaches itself to the only spot on a bee that they cannot groom with their legs. You know, they can move their legs around and they can groom and brush it off. So, in August and September, when the temperature has to be 60 to 80 degrees, we break the hive apart and we put a mite treatment in between the frames. Now, we've gotten many of the bigger commercial people and the other beekeepers that have gotten away from real hard chemicals. There is a hard chemical, a available, several, that you can use for a mite treatment to kill the mites, because the mites actually suck the fluid out of the living bee. It's a host, okay? The living bee becomes a host, and the mite sucks that fluid and lives off of that fluid. And it keeps sucking that fluid out until it weakens the bee that much that they die. And when that happens, you get enough of it, the whole colony will die over winter. And this always takes place over winter. Okay? Because the high point of a mite count is July and August. And that's why they recommend that, when you put that treatment on to kill it. But we're trying to kill an insect on an insect. And so it's very hard to do. So they recommend, Penn State recommends that we do it 4 times a year. Okay, that's fine. But the methods and the things that we're using, some of them you can't leave honey on while you're doing the treatment. Most treatments are on for 4 to 6 weeks. So, I'm also a lazy beekeeper. I'm not going to lift 240 pounds of supers off and set them aside somewhere so I can get down in to put a treatment on here, because it has to be down in the brood box. You can't put it in the front of the hive. You can't put it in the top. It has to be down on the frame where the queen and everything else is. They're very hard chemicals, have the ability to kill the queen. It can stun the queen so that she won't lay eggs. And so come spring, it's worthless anyways, because the bees have a queen, they smell her, they know she's in there, so everything's fine, but the queen's not laying any eggs. I don't use any chemicals. Okay, I'll tell you. I buy new bees every spring, basically. I have for several years. When I first started, the bees were overwintering. They were doing great. I had no problem. But because they got that mite infestation, I don't treat bees because I eat my own honey. Okay? If I leave a box of honey on my hive, which I do for every year, I leave 1 full box of honey on every beehive. That is for their winter. That's for them to live off of. Now, if that mite load is too hard and those bees die, I have a whole box of honey, 60 pounds of honey. What do you do with it? I can take and eat mine. I can just extract it. I can do what I want with it. You use hard chemicals, you can't, because the government won't fit it. They tell you don't use it, simply because it has the ability for, I don't know what the fancy word is, cancer causing, whatever it is. Yeah. So you're not allowed to use it. So I don't treat. My bees have done great this year. I've been harvesting honey. I have about 300-pound harvest already off of 6 hives. And I still have 11 hives to go this year. I'm going to close with this. When I was working at MI, I worked 40 years there at MI in a production area for doing piece rate. Soon after I got my bees, I was running 7